Again, yeah, and welcome back everybody. So very short break, I appreciate that. But I hope you feel that the content has been super during the course of the day so far. All right. So in the next couple of hours, then we're going to deal with the finance and performance work in tow through the chair, Julie, and then we'll obviously look at our partnerships, audit and assurance work, and some governance matters, some of which do require approval, of course, so we need to make sure there's proper time given to consideration for those. So if everybody's reasonably refreshed, and that, obviously we'll try and take a little short break during this, but if everybody's reasonably refreshed, shall we turn to Julie, and this is item 11. And we'll ask Julie to bring to our attention what we need to think about from the March and April work of the Finance and Performance Academy. So with you, Julie, thanks.
Okay, so thank you. So you'll be glad all those personal conversations we can finish and we can get into the really exciting things about finance and performance. You've got in the pack, you've got my two chairs reports for March and April, and they're in the new format where we do the alert, the assure and advise, so I'll take those as read. You've also got a copy of the annual report, which I'll come back to just at the end, and you've also got a copy of how our discussions have mapped across strategic priorities. So that's just kind of belt and braces. We knew that was happening, but that just now kind of reinforces those conversations and where we're having them. So a couple of things I've included in the alert section on the two reports. And what's been really good in listening to discussions today is the number of times which the threads through our conversations are coming together. So Mel talked about the strike stuff, we've talked about it in lots of our agendas. Sajid updated on it in April's Finance and Performance Committee that followed the junior doctors' strike. And of course, it impacts, the strikes impact across all our academies, across finance, performance, quality and people. I think what I noticed that I probably hadn't picked up on is we don't kind of end the strike and feel the impact. We will be feeling the impact for the next 6 and 12 months. And that's due to things like time off in lieu, due to the impact on our staff, due to our performance kind of. So it's not we do the hump of the strike and then phew, all done. No, actually the impact of that we are going to feel for at least 6, 12 months ahead, maybe longer. Saj shared some statistics with us, they're in the report, Mel talked about them. I think the only other thing we pulled out was a great job was being done across planning, command and control to actually mitigate the impact of the strike. So, we have felt the impact, but we would have felt it a lot more without that work that's been ongoing. The other thing included in the alert section in the March's report was the financial plan. We had the opportunity to spend an hour on it in development, so I'm not going to talk a lot about that. Needless to say, there will be a lot of work for the Academy as we move into 23-24 on monitoring the waste reduction plan. We understand the governance processes that have been put in place, but I think we will track as Finance and Performance Academy and board how they are going. And what triggers are happening where we may need to go further and faster. So lots of work in 23-24, but we had a good discussion in development where we all had the ability to contribute to what was happening and understand it. In the advice section of the reports, delivery of the financial targets for 2022. So ended the year with a 200k surplus, slightly better than plan. You've got the detail in the finance report, but a great result. It almost looks as if you delivered your financial plan. That was easy. It doesn't happen without that effort across the organisation. So I know the finance team have done lots of work in pulling those numbers together, but we congratulated the kind of organisation on achieving that for last financial year. They've been audited now, but a good result. We know next year is going to be a lot more challenging. Two more quick things to pull out. Every one of our meetings we see an improvement report, and at our April meeting we saw the urgent emergency care. So we've talked about the good work that the urgent emergency care team have been doing on a number of agendas. They've been doing a lot of work to improve ward-based metrics, and that was one of the areas of focus. And just some of the examples of that, in this year, the time for a patient being clinically ready to transfer to award has gone down from 7 to 4.5 hours. The average length of stay for admitted patients had gone down from 11 to just over 8 hours. They are marked improvements, and I think they're just an example of the improvement thread. So as well as looking at our detailed performance statistics, we're looking at the improvements that are actually driving those. And I think they're really good examples of how our patients, and not just the patients, but the people who come into A&E with them, how that feels. To reduce those times makes a marked difference on that patient journey. And the other quick thing to pull out was capital. So we spent slightly less in 22-23 than we planned, mainly due to external factors. We talked about the reasons for that. I think we spent 21 million and planned 25 million. I've written those numbers down right, Matthew? Yeah. But lots of reasons externally why we didn't deliver that full plan. We did talk about the 23-24 plan, 70 million pounds plus. And what Matthew shared with us in the meeting was our asset base is 200 million. And yet in 23-24, we're planning to spend 70 million pounds on capital. That's a magnificent achievement. So we talked about the work in the capital strategy group to actually strengthen the resources we've got in place to manage that capital plan across the states, across the other teams. So we actually ensure we deliver it. And, a great shout out to the teams who have attracted all that money into Bradford. Mel talked about the new endoscopy unit being on our risk register for a number of years. We'll start to mitigate that risk when we get the new endoscopy unit. We've got the St Luke's Day Centre, we've got the Community Diagnostic Centre, and I think it's fair to say they don't happen without lots of work going on in the organisation to attract that money in. So, well done to all of those concerned. You've got lots more in the report. I'm not going to go through them in detail. You have got a copy of the annual report that summarises that we believe that during 22-23 we took all reasonable steps to perform the duties that were delegated by board to Finance and Performance Academy. And we also did some work on our effectiveness. And I think as all the other academies have asked, it would be really good if board members felt there was something we need to be doing, should be doing, or could be doing better. Really happy to listen to that. And take that on board if anybody's got any suggestions. They're just things I would pull out.
That's great, sure. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah. So, colleagues, just reflecting on financial performance. Has anything arisen or any issues people would like to be noted? Comments on? So, Matt, please.
Yeah, just to reiterate on the last point, Julie said just around all the teams involved, and of course my team are heavily involved in that from a capital perspective. But it's and just to know, those 3 capital schemes Julie pointed out are further added to. In that we've got 56.73 million of schemes that we're dealing with right now. And actually, if I add the aseptic unit that's in design, as I call it, that's 61 million pounds. Room 6 radiology, OMS, BIHR, single isolation, plastics, neonatal. So these are all really, really big schemes. And the components and mechanisms that have to go behind all of these, from the project board, the programme board, down to, for example, the estates boards, and then all the design team meetings that sit behind them are really gigantic. There's a real big machine behind delivering this and getting us to that safe landed position, really. So I just wanted to credit everybody involved with that, because it's really big. Don't underestimate the work that goes in to trying to deliver 61 million pounds worth of work.
No, it's good context, that, Matt. Thank you. Thanks for that additional bit. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and Matthew, please. Yeah.
Just to build on Julie's, some of my notes Julie's picked up on virtually all of them. The only thing I would just like to we'll just close the month. I'm just about to close month 1 down, which is inclusive this year of our 29 million pound waste reduction programme. We will report an on-plan position, but it's going to be tight this year. We have included in that £500,000 estimate for junior doctor industrial action, just picking up on what Julie said in terms of the direct cost and then the ongoing implications that we might face as an organisation, and have had to use a degree of the central flexibility that we have when we're talking about the financial plan to get it over the line. But it's just in context really that we've got a £29 million challenge to continue doing what we're doing, and not to stifle anybody's ambition, and for a lot of decisions to be taken, but we've already heard a number of presentations today about having more surgeons, number of developments in the nursing paper around delivering the extra demand that's coming through the organisation, a number of developments within maternity, there was another one as well, and there's a number of business cases in tertiary emergency care. We've clearly got to get the balance right this year. It's going to be some tough choices that we make as an organisation, aligning to our strategic needs, what are our priorities. So it's just getting, we've got to make sure we get that balance right. The back of a really difficult financial challenge.
Thank you.
Max,
Thank
can
you.
I just add to that?
Of course,
And kind of just to follow on from what Matthew said, and one of the things we've talked about in the academy is a new regime. You know, this is not a regime where you can choose to spend more than you've got. If you do spend more than you get, you quite quickly, a number of measures come in place, one of which is decision making is taken out of our hands, isn't it? This is not just you overspend and it's okay that you overspend. The regime is tight, isn't it?
And I think we'll probably allude to how the planning has evolved in the closed session.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Julia. Sash, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Max. I just wanted to add a couple of points. So the first one was our aspiration, certainly from an operational performance perspective, of being in the top quartile performance against our constitutional standards. And I think that report out that we do every month at Finance Performance Academy has highlighted the journey we've been on in terms of getting to those positions. When it comes to a number of our constitutional standards. And what we're about to do is restate our position in terms of taking a look back now, but also pushing ourselves further. So not being happy and just resting on the basis that, oh yeah, we'll get to top quartile. The next push is likely to be, well, what's going to take to get into the top decile? And in some constitutional standards, we're already there, and that's certainly something we're going to push forward on and present back at F&P Academy. And the second one, effectiveness. What was really good at the last meeting we were able to do was have colleagues like Karen there and Mohammed there, and the discussion, just to give you an example of the strides, the impact on our people, being taken by Karen into that afternoon's People's Academy to have a direct discussion about, or the discussion and impact on the number of cancellations we'd had that Mel's already highlighted in her report, being taken into the quality meeting as well. And so that then started to feel really like a joined up conversation, and non-exec colleagues being able to hear firsthand in one academy and then understand in the context of another academy, and some real challenge there, and that really did feel a strong and sort of collaborative, cohesive way of working. So just wanted to reflect that in terms of the effectiveness.
Yes, the connection between the academies is hugely important. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sash. Yeah. Any other comments, please? Yeah. Julie, thank you for the brief. That's terrific. Yeah, it's great. And thank you for the work that's got been done in Finance and Performance Academy. That's great. Matthew and Sash, thank you for the additional context as well. Helpful. Okay, shall we move into our work on partnerships and just offer John, as our Director of Integration, an opportunity to bring to our attention anything in relation to this work across the place and beyond. Jump with you, John, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I make no apology for saying what I always say. I don't think you should rely on this kind of one side of A4 to say everything you need to know about partnerships. I think everything we talk about in board explains some of the work we're doing in partnerships. We heard James, from a surgical perspective, talk about collaborative working with the Care Trust and with our multi-agency integrated discharge team. Mel's update referred to various things at place, including the Bridge project. Max, I note in your remarks, you talk about meeting the chairs of neighbouring FTs and looking for opportunities there with a focused discussion about partnership of all things. We must have rehearsed it. Even Anne, in her discussion about research, talked about working with council colleagues. So it just permeates everything we do, and it should. You know, it shouldn't be remarkable. It should be absolutely the way we work. And I think it is. Comments from Karen about the university and colleagues there, etc., etc. So if I just turn to the side of A4, the update under the 4 headings we use to summarise this, I'll just pick one thing out from each. I'm going to assume you've read it, but Under the Reducing Inequalities heading, you may be aware this week is National Equality, Diversity and Human Rights Week. As part of that, Kez and the team and the staff groups have been doing various displays in the main concourse, and took the opportunity yesterday to launch the Trust's Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy, which has a discrete section all about what we're doing on health inequalities. So that's come under the auspices of the Equality and Diversity Council, which Mel chairs, and it's a good place because it brings together the kind of Equality Act requirements and the unwarranted variations in health inequality, and it shows how they're connected, but they're not the same thing, and it gives us a really broad perspective on all of that. So we've got the Reducing Inequality stuff out there. That's part of the strategy. And we'll make sure perhaps for an action, we'll just make sure you all get a copy sent to you direct. But it's out there. It's on the web. In terms of our place and acting as one in the place, there's various headlines here. I suppose the thing I would flag for your attention is that Mel and Faluki have been having a discussion about some of the specialties, some of the areas we work on together, and whether we need to give a particular focus to 2 or 3 of those. You will remember a couple of years ago we had an acute provider collaboration, which was a kind of big, quite heavily engineered programme of work. I think it was helpful, but it was overtaken by Actors One and a different way of working. But it's probably the case now, in a different context, in a post-COVID era. There are 2 or 3 things where we could do with some focused work between the 2 trusts. I already lead a piece of work on stroke with Ray's opposite number at Airedale, with David Crampsey. Ray leads a piece of work on haematology and oncology with my opposite number, Stuart, over at Airedale. And there are a couple of other areas where we ought to be asking ourselves, is this actually collectively a programme of work where collaboratively we tackle 2 or 3 things? There might be a priority around fragile services or estate opportunities or whatever. So a kind of mini acute collaboration with a small A and a small C, not some huge, heavily engineered thing. So we'll talk about it in our exec team here. I'll go along with David, we'll have the same conversation at Airedale, and there is a forthcoming exec-to-exec conversation between the 2 trusts in which we can just develop that idea further. But I guess, spoiler alert, I think what I'm saying is it looks like we will move towards a more formalised piece of work between the 2 organisations, but something that's quite agile and fit for purpose and not some huge kind of heavyweight thing. So that's us acting as one. In terms of the ICB for West Yorkshire and the Association of Acute Trusts, there's lots of work going on kind of big strategy and agreeing, how we do things together and how we do things separately. Mel alluded to, and I was going to mention to you, this piece of work, which is to celebrate the NHS's 75th birthday, which is coming up on the 5th of July. And there's an invitation through the NHS Assembly to all organisations to have a bit of a conversation and feedback the responses to some fairly prescribed questions. It's not like a free-for-all, what do you think about everything? There's actually 3 or 4 specific questions they want us to address. So I am convening a panel. I've asked my fellow execs to help come up with 1 or 2 nominees, just to try and get a cross-section from across the organisation, senior, junior, clinical, non-clinical, and have a discussion about these questions, which we will feed through. And I guess I was just going to say the offer is there. If any non-execs want to join the conversation, you'd be more than welcome. I'm afraid we've been given a ridiculous timetable to do this work in. It is what it is. It's next Wednesday. We've got an hour. It will be online, and we'll use the new version of Menti. So you're familiar with Menti. The thing now is Slido. It's just a contractual thing. We've moved from Menti to Slido. So we'll be doing a bit of interactive stuff, and we'll do that next Wednesday for an hour. So if any Neds wish to take part in that, you're very welcome. It's not a problem if you don't. If you wish to, just let me know, and I can involve you. And then the final piece of this is Anchor Institution, where I think we've got lots of good things to talk about, but I'll just pick up. I guess I'll just pick up on Project Search, which is something we often talk about. It's something we're incredibly proud of. Our work with young adults with a learning disability, supporting them. They become interns for a year. They rotate through 3 different posts, and at the end of it, their employment prospects are significantly increased. I was chatting to Kez, our head of Equality and Diversity, who's got the overall lead for this. He was saying to me, we've had a relatively small number of interns this year, I think about 8. But looks like a much bigger cohort next year, 15 or 16. And in part, not entirely because of, but in part We've got a new coordinator, Amanda Clayman, who's been doing a terrific job making sure all the current interns have got good stuff lined up and selling the possibilities of the future programme. So that's going from strength to strength. And the other thing that struck me just listening to colleagues talking earlier on as an anchor institution is the community health checks out there, helping identify people with a high blood pressure or other kind of risks. You know, a couple of years ago, that would not have seemed like the job in the acute hospital. Now it absolutely is, because we're acting as one and we're getting upstream and hopefully anticipating things. So lots of different ways in which we're working in partnership. I'll leave that there.
That's lovely, John. Thank you. Thank you for highlighting some key issues in each of the 4 areas, and particularly for your comments on Project Search, which we ought to be proud of. It's a terrific initiative, national of course, but we're one of the few locally who are supporting that, so it's great. Colleagues, anything partnership-wise? Julie first and then Mel? Yeah.
Just a comment really, John, really pleased to see, I know we're not doing a big acute collaboration project, but we talked about all the kind of risks and, you know, the kind of constraints we've got on the agenda today, through not having enough of this, not having this. The kind of working together has got to be a win-win, and clearly it's got to be in the right places, hasn't it? But I just think doing that is really important, and the more things we can do without talking about one trust or whatever, which turns people off, the more we can do together, the better, isn't it?
Yeah.
So really pleasing to hear that.
And we do already work with Airedale in lots of ways.
I know.
But this is about problem solving. We've got
Yeah.
2 or 3 areas where we know we can make a difference together.
Yeah.
So we should.
No, that's it, Julie. Thank you. And Mel, please. Yeah.
So I just think we're been a bit stingy with the kind of greens on the dashboard, because I'm like looking and thinking, well, green, if we're not green for Actors One, I don't know what would turn this out. I don't, John's such a hard taskmaster on this. You know. But equally, you know, ICB and YS, it's playing a full part, and it's participating, leading on behalf of, I see us doing all of those things.
It was such a positive conversation. We get to look back at the ratings, don't we?
I am a
Giving ourselves-
miserable git, aren't I? I mean, I think there's something. I'm probably just hesitant because I think we're doing a load of stuff, but I'm not supremely confident about the outcomes yet. So I can absolutely point to loads of inputs, but I can't say here is absolute categorical evidence of what we've delivered. But when I look at this in context, I think that's a fair challenge. I think we're probably being a bit mean, and we should probably be a bit more generous about what's green and what's amber, because amber takes you all the way up to nearly red. And, you know, Mel is right. We've done a ton of stuff in Actors One and Wyatt, etc. So, yeah, we'll review that and it'll look a bit greener next time.
No.
Really sharp.
Yeah. It's a great point you make, Mel. The discussions can happen outside of here, of course, but I had thought the same last time and declined to mention it, but with the our health and well-being of our staff being one of the best NHS employees being a red, perhaps is a little hard on us, given the thriving issues, etc. But I accept that there are some things that we don't all know collectively at this table. So Paul and then Karen, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to illustrate, it's not actually an Actors One specific, I just wanted to go below the bonnet of some of the stuff I've alluded to consistently around the EPR, for example, just for a marker of that. So colleagues who were here previously predated me, you go through a very exhaustive process with Cerner about a thing called current state validation, and effectively both Calderdale and Bradford have done that to be clear about, well, what is Airedale building from? So that exercise has occurred, and a gateway with Cerner contractually for Airedale has happened because of that work, effort and energy applied by colleagues in Bradford and Calderdale to get to that baseline. The other thing is that we've deliberately said, in addition to that general level of collaboration, there are 2 or 3 formal programs within the overall EPR program which are joint or several. So our deployment of theatre anaesthetics and critical care functionality in Bradford will now be done as a single programme of work, fully in conjunction with Airedale. It doesn't make sense to decouple those. It only makes sense to couple them. And ditto our work on mobility will happen across Calderdale, Bradford and Airedale simultaneously. So I think that's not a place-based conversation at one level, that's a Bradford Teaching Hospital, firm and strong foundations, then being actively used in direct relationship with those neighbouring organisations. So again, doesn't need to feature on here, can feature in a 6-month digital update, but again, just that point that says deliberately on a week-by-week basis, on the basis of business requirements, not some who's the big trust, who's a small trust, what's the organisational shape, what's the form, none of that's necessary to get us into the place where we're doing some really strong, deliberative, collaborative work.
Yes, that's helpful, Paul, thank you, thanks for the additional detail, yeah. Karen, please.
I'm going to say something really obvious, so I apologise now, but when you look at that board around people, place, patients and partners, that is a brilliant example of where you bring strategy to life through day to day. And I think we've heard it through the academy updates as well, where we've got a plan and that's on the wall, that 22 to 27 strategy, and actually everything we do day to day is getting us to that place. So it was just, John's update just really highlighted for me that strategy and how it links back to what we're here to do on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, that's fair, yeah, thank you. And I don't want to place anybody on the spot, but I know we all work in the wider system in some way or other, but of course in two of our non-exec directors we do have a chair and a vice chair of two of the place committees, and I promise I'm not putting it on the spot, but I just wondered whether, is there anything you want to advise director colleagues about how they're developing, how they're looking?
I mean, what I would say about finance and performance, and it'll be interesting to see, we've had some conversations, Karen and I, is at the moment, I think we're doing a lot of the mechanics of it. So we summarise things together, and what I would know is the change from colleagues in the room. So I worked in the system a number of years ago, and what I've noted is that movement. So I think these changes are slow, but that willingness to want to work together and to make a difference together has moved forward. I think we need to move into better conversations in the Finance and Performance Committee about so what. So we have a conversation about what does it look like when we all put it together and what are the challenges we're all facing. And we talk about some of the work we're doing, but I think we need to get into some more of the so what. And we're having those conversations as chairs of the committees. And I suppose it's development intake. We've only been going.
Months,
Well,
really?
yes,
Yes.
maybe 10, July, 11, yeah. But it's probably, probably not surprising where we are, but I think there is still more we can do to go into some of that so what conversation together.
That's great. Yeah, these are prompted comments by the way, so thank you for that, Julia.
Yeah.
It struck me that we never actually talked about that important role that you play there. Of course, it's beyond your trust role, although you go with
It's a blend together, and it's really good to do the two.
Yes.
And you do need to do the two, I think, to understand.
Yes, and pleasing to know that you think the foundation blocks are there in terms of
Definitely. People's willingness is, has made a marked change. Behaviours have made a marked change. I think we need to move into some of the so what's now.
Yeah, together. Yeah, so all together. Yeah. Good point. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah.
And obviously, as Vice Chair of the Place People Academy,
Yeah.
you want to share?
I think the People Committee's been in a similar place to F&P, and I found it really frustrating, if I'm being really honest, to start with, because there were a lot of words and very little action, and we weren't making a difference, and we should be. So we did build some foundations. And I think what I've seen is other areas are letting people in. So it was all very siloed, and if you worked in the care trust, then you all understood this. But then we almost operated in a vertical rather than a horizontal. And I think we've really started to look at the 4 key strategic areas and work end to end. So my problem's always been that pipe in your room doesn't just heat your room, it starts somewhere and it ends somewhere else. And getting them to think about that pipe in their room flows through somewhere else. So I think we've managed to change that. And one thing we have done a lot of is, so I've had meetings with Daniel and James, so more of a committee structure to say how are we moving it on, because I just needed to do something about the fact. I found it really frustrating. And what we've started to do is talk about what difference have we made today. So I think probably last month is the first time I've really felt that we did make a difference. We had a brilliant conversation about care in the community, And now we've got little subcommittees breaking off to actually fix some of the issues, but cross area. And before it was the care trusts were going to go and fix their problems, and and we focused a lot on that because it would solve a lot of problems along that wider pipe. So I really feel it's starting to make a difference now. And actually, from my perspective, oh my goodness, what a big wide world out of there, and what a contribution Bradford makes to that, and then vice versa. So it's the whole system for me just makes it all, that jigsaw is brilliant when you operate at that level and you understand. So yeah, fantastic. But yeah, starting to make the difference that it was set up to do, I think.
No, that's great insight from you both. Thank you very much for your important leadership roles, of course, there, aren't there? So yeah, delighted. Thank you, Karen, for your candor about getting people together and tackling some individual thinking to act as one. Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, delighted with what you do. Thanks. Colleagues happy with partnerships? We've given a good run over, know where we are. Yeah. Okay. Indeed, we have the board tomorrow now, don't we?
Sure.
Yeah, we have the partnership board this tomorrow. Yeah. Good. Okay. Thank you. Moving into item 18 of section 4E, we do have the report from the chair of the audit committee, which is tabled, of course. Julie, could I turn back to you and ask you, is there anything you want to draw from this?
No, I chair the meeting, so happy that people take the report as read. I'm happy to answer questions if anybody's got anything they would like to ask. It goes through what we talked about in the meeting.
Yeah. Great, so thank you. So obviously, colleagues have had a chance to see it. Thank you, Julie, for stepping in. I think it was fairly short notice. That it was.
Very short notice.
Yeah, totally the time. Yeah. So, okay, thanks for stepping in. Colleagues, content to take that, be assured regarding that report and the ongoing work. And of course, Julie and Barry remain at your disposal if there's anything to. Okay. Item 19 is board assurance framework and our high-level risks. So an opportunity to reflect on how we feel we're doing and what the key risks are. So John, may I turn to you again, please, to bring to our attention what you feel is important.
Yeah, thank you, Max. And that's what I'll do. There's quite a lot here and some detail. I have to assume you've had the opportunity to look at it because there isn't time to go through every line item here. You wouldn't thank me for it. I'll do this in 3 chunks. So I'll talk about the board assurance framework, then I'll do the risk appetite statement, and then finally I'll do the high-level risks. So the board assurance framework, our current board assurance framework, the format of it was developed a year ago, and our risk management strategy commits us to an annual review of the BAF. So that's what the corporate governance have done. They've undertaken a full review with the lead execs for each area, for each strategic objective, and they've proposed amendments where needed. Those proposals went through the executive team on the 17th of April, and we had them here for a board development session on the 20th of April. And then finally, individual academies reviewed and supported the changes when they met on the 26th of April. So they looked at their respective things. So you've got 4 points of review there: the original work, exec team, board development, and the academies. Because of that, I'm not going to go through all of the changes in detail here, but just to be clear, there are no new strategic risks on the BAF. None have been added, nor have any been closed, but some of the risk descriptions have been amended, and you would expect that to reflect the current context. And these are all set out with track changes in the cover sheet for this item. So if you need to see what's changed in the risk descriptions, right here in the cover sheet. And that's it in terms of descriptors. Nothing new, nothing closed, but some risk descriptions have changed. That's been through kind of 4 points of review. If we turn then to the scores on the BAF, there are 6 changes to the risk scores since we last met as a board in March, because of the work I've just described, which has changed some of the descriptions, and also because we've kind of triggered the cycle at the end of the year where we reset some things. That's particularly true of finance, but it's true across the board. So the BAF is normally quite stable. It's not volatile, and you wouldn't expect it to be, because these things are quite long-term and by definition quite strategic. So you might be thinking 6 changes, that seems like a lot. Actually, it's a function of all the review work we've done, and the fact that we've clocked the end of the year. So the 6 changes, just to make sure you're aware of them, but again, I'm not going to go in lots of detail. We've already done 4 points of review, exec team, academies, etc. 3 of the current scores have gone up. 2 of these are finance risks. I think that's the point I was making about it's the kind of end of one year and the start of a new year. One of them is a quality risk, which is about addressing unmet need. We changed the wording of the risk descriptor, and it's kind of changed the stance on how we view that risk. So 3 have gone up in score. 1 has got a current risk score that's gone down, and that's something we've talked about a bit in this meeting already, about a healthy and engaged workforce, about sickness, turnover rates. I love that expression before about stability, etc. Guess what? We're seeing that play through to the strategic risks in the BAF. That's exactly what we expect. I'd be concerned if that wasn't happening. And then finally, 2 target scores have gone down, by which I mean the score we want to get down to at the end of the process is now lower. So the COVID backlog target risk score has gone down, and the healthy workforce target risk score has gone down. What that really means is we've set a more ambitious target for ourselves. We want to see the risk mitigation drive the risk even further down. So it's about ambition. It's not about, oh, great, the score's gone down. It's actually about saying, we believe we can push harder on this, and we believe further mitigation will deliver further improvements. So those are the 6 changes in score for the BAF. The only final point I want to make on this is it's a bit nerdy, but it's a bit mea culpa. If you look at the front page of the BAF, where we do the summary, what you'll see is that for the individual scores, they've all got a right rating. And then in the right-hand column, we have a commentary, and we give a score for Q1. And if you look at 2A and 2B, the finance and the performance risks, the colour in the commentary doesn't really align to the colours that you're seeing in the marks we've given ourselves, 16 and 20. Now that's something we've picked up in the quality control process, but it was too late to change it for what came to you here. They are red, and that's what we would expect. That's where we are at this time of year, but they're not. But the Q1 score for finance and for performance is red. The other scores are correctly colored down. So I'll pause there on BAF, and then I can come on afterwards if you wish and do risk appetite and high-level risks.
That's great, John. Thank you. Yeah. So bonus assurance framework, people content, they've seen that, they've heard from John, additional detail provided, which is really helpful. Should we get on to thinking about risk then? Risk appetite? Absolutely. Risks, yeah.
Thank you. So the risk appetite statement, again, this was agreed a year ago. Just like the board assurance framework, our risk strategy commits us to an annual review of this. So we think about our appetite. Are we comfortable? Should we be more kind of ambitious? Should we be more conservative? This has been reviewed by the executive team and again at our board development session in April, and the academies on the 26th of April for their respective areas of the risk appetite statement. There's been one change in this, which is in relation to risk 2B, in relation to performance, where we're saying we ought to be open rather than cautious. I think these words are a bit silly. It's like Ofsted reducing things to one word. But anyway, our risk appetite for performance should be open. We should be a bit more, I don't know, essentially imaginative, willing to try different stuff to help us get on top of performance. And cautious implies, oh no, we'll only do what we've always done. Well, we haven't done that, and it probably misrepresents it. So we need to be more open, because that's truly how we behave. There's been a few tiny tweaks to supporting descriptions, but there's nothing material I need to draw to your attention, and it's here anyway in track changes if you wish to see it. So again, I'll pause there on the risk appetite statement and just check that you're okay with that, or any comments or questions.
Julie, please.
Just important to say we had those conversations in academies as well, and believe that was the right thing to have in our risk approach, didn't we? So we did discuss it. They have been through academies and we have had discussions there. So I just think it's important to say they've been validated through those conversations.
Yeah, and do we as directors feel that more accurately represents where we are? Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Julie.
Max, I was just going to say, particularly bearing in mind industrial action and then the activity. So we're almost back in a loop of catching up. So I think the more open we are to ideas about these kind of backlogs that are created through industrial action with no site end in mind, it's even more important.
Yeah, entirely. Thank you, thanks, Karen, yeah. Thank you, John,
Thank
yes.
you, Mark. So the final piece of this is the high-level risks. We shouldn't get hung up on terminology, but it's really important. These are operational risks. These generally are kind of bottom up, they're percolated up because individual teams across the organisation enter things onto Datix, our risk management system. If the scores trigger it, then we review them in the executive team. And if it's 15 in the board, we're looking at it, every month routinely, systematically. So our high-level risk register, looking at operational risks. Again, this got reviewed as it does every month by the executive team meeting on 20th of March and the 17th of April. So there's 2 months in between these boards. So we looked at it twice. And the academies looked at their respective risks on the 29th of March, the 26th of April. And what you've got is the enclosed summary that ETM looked at on the 17th of April. So the most recent summary we looked at of movements. The movement log does what it says. And what that shows is there's one new risk being added, which is about pharmacy accommodation. And anyone who knows the pharmacy environment will know it's not great. It's one of the things we're looking at through the outstanding pharmacy programme right now. So pharmacy accommodation has been added as a new risk. There's no other changes in score. There are no operational risks that were suggested for closure. And there were 3 which were beyond their review date when we looked at this on the 17th of April. One of those has already been updated, so it doesn't appear here in the papers in front of you. We've taken it off. And the 2 which remain, one's about industrial action, the other's about winter pressures, but they expired on the 31st of March. So I'm absolutely not worried about this. The important thing is that we're managing the industrial action and winter pressures, as we very clearly are, but it's good governance that our risk register is up to date. So we just need to do a bit of housekeeping and tidy that up. But these are not things that are kind of 6 months past review date. They're about 6 weeks past review date, and we just need to sort that out. But in the context of a very large number of risks, I think that's a very good position to be in.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Noted that. I appreciate your comments on that. Yeah, thank you. Colleagues, the high-level risk register, did anything arise from that? Or John's briefing, and do we want to check? No? Are we assured? And indeed, do we approve the scores and the colour ratings that are shown? Yeah. Thank you. Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed, John. Yeah, thanks. Colleagues, paper 20 is the report from myself as chair of the Charitable Funds Committee, and includes the annual reports and the terms of reference, which have both been through the Charitable Funds Committee. We've been asked to note the discussions and outcomes on the 25th of April, to review the committee's annual report and see whether we think any development work is required, and to approve the proposed amendment to the committee's terms of reference as attached to Appendix 2, very minor, I think. So I should just check with John as fairly recent appointee as executive lead for the Charitable Funds Committee. And we'll see some real step changes in the way we're moving there as a hospital charity. John, is there anything you want to bring to the director's attention regarding this?
No, I think the chair's write-up captures it all, actually. The charity is working towards potential independence, but that's a decision we would make as a board. There are some great initiatives underway at the moment, including the 100 Club, and there's some really good engagement, which even in the lunch break we were talking about some stuff going on with different partners across the place. It's where it should be. It's on an upward trajectory. Things are looking very good. Ambitions are good. We've got some recruitment to do to grow the team, but it's in a good place.
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, and again, rather than me saying it from the chair, do you feel that the committee is reasonably effective? Is there anything you want to?
No, the committee does exactly what it should do. It hears the reports from the director of the charity, and we have an operational group which does some of the nitty gritty. So that does the heavy lifting, and then there's assurance in the Charitable Funds Committee, which is as it should be.
That's been a strong improvement in my mind, by the way, the reporting from the Ops Committee, because of the significant amount of work that's done in there, so good stuff. Okay. Colleagues, we've been asked to note the Chair's report and the annual report and terms of reference. Are we content to do that? Yeah? Great stuff. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay. Moving on to the last section of governance. I'll tell you what, some matters for approval here. Should we just take a 5-minute no more, leg stretch. And anybody wants to get a drink, refresh, and then we can finish off the last half hour with these governance matters, yeah?